Throughout this training, or at any time you need support, there are many ways to contact us. You can follow us on all major social media platforms or email us directly via our website, or you can click the Cancel Connect icon shown at the bottom of this slide on our website to book a consultation with one of our experts.
So we started the measure phase with general information about statistics and measures, and we've covered the common ways to measure baseline data. And we've just finished the section on basic data display tools. Now it's about you. In this section, we'll do a quick walkthrough with you to select the baseline measure for your project. Let's take a fresh look at our SIPOC. In order to determine the baseline, we need to solidify the project why. The project why is the focus of our project and should be the main object of the problem and goal statement. In our paper airplane example here, the team has identified that their project why is on time. The problem is that they have too many late deliveries, and the goal is to eliminate those late deliveries.
The why represents an outcome and is always linked to an output requirement. The project why is the measure that we want to improve. The main objectives of the measure phase are to solidify how you will measure your project why and also to identify and collect the data that we'll need for root cause analysis. The causes of our output results will always live in either the input or the process, so that's where we'll look for our causal data, but not until we've solidified our baseline measure.
Keep in mind that you may have multiple project whys. For example here, the primary why is on time, and we may have a secondary why that measures quality. The project is about to eliminate late deliveries, but we can't let the quality deteriorate either. We've gone through several options for measuring your baseline, and the team will need to select which measure or measures will best illustrate the best and the after. For example, if the team is focused on reducing variation, then measuring the average won't be a great indicator of improvement. But using the standard deviation would be a great idea.
And with the measure identified, the team can select the chart or the charts that will best graphically tell the story of their data. For example, if we are focused on reducing variation, we might select to show the data on a run chart to illustrate the pattern over time, and then also display that same data on a histogram to show the snapshot of the center, the shape, and the spread. The point is that you can select multiple ways to tell the story of your data.
We've put together this simple table to give you some prompts for choosing the right chart for you. Each of the charts that we've covered are listed in the first column. Across the top are a few key points. First, let's look at the x-axis of the chart. If you're using a run or control chart, the x-axis along the bottom will be some measure of time or sequence. So hours, days, day of the month of the year, whatever makes sense to your project. A histogram or box plot requires continuous data such as dollars, weight, or time. A column chart or Pareto chart requires the data to be in categories. So that means that it requires discrete data.
The colorful headers in the rest of the table walk through the main purposes that are served by each of the charts. In your workbook, you'll see the measure selection and chart selection tables to help you solidify these pieces for your own project. When we're collecting measures, we always have to stay connected with the purpose for the measures, and this can be a challenge even for experienced data analysts. We recommend that you plan out your baseline measure along with the chart to display the data. The point is that we have a lot of choices for how to illustrate the before and the after situation. Sketching it out first can help you save a lot of time. We'll give you a quick example.
So let's say that we are a team working in a bank, and the problem that we have to solve is that the average time to transfer money takes too long. Specifically, the average time from submission to the funds being received. So how might the team measure and display the baseline? Maybe they'll use the average time as the baseline. And let's think about what chart would best illustrate the problem.
A run chart would be good to show the patterns of data over time. So maybe we'll group our data by week along the x-axis, and we'll show the average time by week on the y-axis. We'd expect it to come out something like this. And of course, because it's a run chart, we'll include the median.
Always remember the median.
But we always want to remember that averages hide the spread, and customers don't feel the average, they feel the spread. So a great accompaniment to the run chart would be a histogram. We'll sort our time from fastest to slowest on the x-axis, and the y-axis will be the count of transactions in each time bucket or bin. And here's our normal distribution or bell curve. But maybe our data won't be a normal curve. Most of our transactions are really fast. It's just a small proportion that get hung up and take longer. We think that that's what's pulling our average down. So maybe the shape of our data will look more like this purple line. Okay, now that we've sketched this out, the team is confident that measuring the average time and displaying the data with a run chart and a histogram will be great.
Let's hope so. In your workbooks, you'll find 2 more examples for you to play with. You'll find a description of the organization, a little bit about which process you are improving, as well as the problem and goal statements. Your task is to select which baseline measure might be a good choice for the scenario. Make sure to capture why you selected this measure. With your baseline measure selected, select 1 or 2 charts to represent that data. And just sketch out what that chart might look like by putting a title on the chart and labeling the axis. Then you can just fill in the chart with dummy data points to finish the activity. Pause the video now and give yourself a little bit of time to experience the decision-making process of a green belt.
And welcome back. How'd you do with that activity? Maybe not as easy as you thought? Hopefully you experienced how this thinking through or sketching out of the data will help the team to prepare for the upcoming task of preparing a data collection plan. If you have any questions or comments on these activities or on any Greenbelt topics, just message us on any of our social media platforms or join the Greenbelt group for some interesting collaboration.
At this point in the measure phase, the baseline measure or measures have been identified and the team has selected the charts that they will use to display the data. The next step in this phase is to determine what data do we need to collect to analyze the root cause. In the measure phase, we plan our data collection needs, and in the analyze phase, we analyze the data that we collected. Pause this video again for a quick quiz on your baseline measures.
We've solidified your project why, or the outcome that your project will improve. Now we'll begin exploring the causes of the problem. These are our X's. The X variables come from the input or the process steps, and they're brainstormed and prioritized in the measure phase, so that data can be collected for the X and the Y at the same time. The goal of a DMAIC project is to identify what few process and input variables, our X's, mainly influence the output measures. Those are our Y's.
In mathematical terms, y is a function of x. You'll see how it's written as a formula on the page in your workbook. So y is equal to f of x1, x2, x3, etc. Meaning that the results is the outcome of all of these different factors that occur in the input and process. We've identified our y, or the result. Now we need to come up with potential causes to see if we can identify the x's causing the y's.
We're not in the analyze phase yet, but at this point in the project, you're very likely to have some ideas of root causes of the problem. In order to determine what data we might need when we get to the analyze phase, it's time for the team to explore their hypotheses about the root causes. We're talking about informal hypotheses at this stage. These are the team's suppositions or proposed explanations of a cause of the problem or the project why.
This is an educated guess made on the basis of limited evidence as a starting point for analysis. When we are talking about hypotheses, It's important to distinguish a potential cause from a solution. For example, we need new equipment is an idea for a solution. The hypothesis might be something like equipment is unreliable, or instead of people need more training, as we always say, we might say staff is incorrectly filling out forms instead. In this section, we'll talk about how to create a list of potential causes using brainstorming, the fishbone, and a SciPoc.
And we'll prioritize and reduce the list of variables to be included in data collection using the filter matrix and multivoting.
Brainstorming is one method to get the team to share what's inside their heads and gather a list of potential root causes. Brainstorming provides a free and open environment that encourages diverse ideas and creative thinking. Collaboration is welcome, and all participants are encouraged to contribute fully, helping them to develop a rich array of creative possibilities. The objective is to gather information and ideas that are spread across multiple people or groups, and to gather diverse ideas all in one place.
We can use brainstorming anytime we have a need to generate a list of creative or unique possibilities. For example, problems, measures, causes, or solutions. It does take some skill to successfully facilitate a brainstorming session, and it's likely that you've been in some bad brainstorming sessions.
And some good ones.
Asking the same group of people to sit in the same room and review the same information that they've seen before is unlikely to result in exciting new ideas. Here we'll cover a few basics for brainstorming, and we'll get into more creative techniques when we get to the improve phase.
The first step is always to clarify the objective. Maybe write it down on a piece of whiteboard or paper or something, and make sure that everyone understands what the objective is. Are we brainstorming potential projects for the team? Maybe we're brainstorming potential measures. Or in this particular phase of the project, we can clarify that we are brainstorming causes of our project why. We want to make sure that the desired outcome is clear before the meeting begins.
The next step is to plan participants. Invite team members, subject matter experts, as well as new people. If the same team brainstorms together regularly, the ideas can get stale. Invite people with different perspectives to generate diversity of thought.
The third step is to determine how and when we will conduct the session. Video conference, meeting room, chain email, hopefully not. If the session will be in person, plan the physical space for your brainstorming session. The space has a massive impact on how people work, think, and feel. Moving your brainstorm outside to a casual lunch place or even a different floor in your building can help get new ideas flowing. When a team is constantly brainstorming together in the same room with the same group of people, the brainstorms may feel repetitive and uninspiring. The change of scenery provided by a brand new space, even for a short period of time, can help people think differently and create new ideas.
Once the participants and the session plan is ready, it's time to notify the participants. On-the-spot creativity is hard to spark, so allow prep time. Share with the participants a description of the objective as early as possible so they can start to come up with ideas on their own, at least 2 full days before the brainstorm. When it comes to getting quantity of ideas, ideating on your own is better, so provide an opportunity for this in your brainstorming efforts. Save the group activity for discussion ideas, and that will lead to further improvements, combining of ideas, etc.
Before the session, it's important for you to plan the method. Good facilitators use more than one technique in a single brainstorming session to keep the creative juices flowing while supporting different styles of thought and expression. Depending upon your situation, you may want to start with one of the unique approaches that we'll learn in the improve phase, or you may want to start with basic brainstorming and then switch things up as needed to ensure you generate a good quantity of really useful creative ideas.
Regardless of what type of brainstorming you'll do, these basic steps apply. Once you're in the session, we have 4 little rules that unlock the creative power of a brainstorming session.
We've all been in a brainstorming session that went nowhere. The goal isn't to be the one to shout out the perfect idea or solution. It's about gathering a lot of diverse ideas, collaboration, and openness to expand our thinking. The last thing you want in a brainstorm is someone who, instead of coming up with ideas, only talks about why the ones already mentioned won't work, which happens quite often. Not only does that kill creativity, but it shifts the group's mindset from a generative one to a critical one. The only way to get good ideas is to have lots to choose from.
During the session, the first step is to generate a big list of ideas. Think about making popcorn. What does it sound like? It starts off quiet, then pop, pop, then pop, 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 and then when it's almost done, it slows down again to pop, pop, pop. When the popcorn stops, it's time to change to a new method to generate more ideas or move to the next step. It's no good to keep pushing it. Come on, guys, we need more ideas. What else? What else?
What else can you think about?
That's a painful brainstorming session. The generate step focuses on quantity over quality. Record everything. That's what the icon means here. Foster an inclusive, supportive environment. No bad ideas has become a brainstorming cliche, but if someone's idea gets shot down quickly, they're less likely to have the confidence to share their next idea.
When people walk into a traditional meeting, they're expected to be prepared and have the answers to the questions. Brainstorms take that pressure off and allow people to contribute half-baked ideas, even if they aren't fully thought through or perfect. Those ideas can help trigger new ideas from other people in the room, and the ideas build off one and another. When the list of ideas has been generated, step 2 is to clarify the ideas. Clarifying means that the team has a chance to ask each other what they meant by their suggestions. It's not a time to evaluate or to challenge, but just to clarify to make sure that there is a great understanding and a clear understanding of what just happened.
Step 3 is to categorize or consolidate the ideas into similar groups, like an affinity diagram. And then the final step is to evaluate the ideas. This can be done in the session itself or after the session as a follow-up. Recognize that a brainstorm session serves a purpose, which is to gather ideas, but you need to follow up in order to bring these ideas to life. Make sure to set up ample time to narrow down your ideas and pursue a few in a structured manner.
Productive group brainstorming can really feel like a win. The team leaves feeling energized, accomplished, and excited for the next steps. Effective brainstorming techniques can help achieve this. On the other hand, when a brainstorming session misses, whether it feels unproductive, repetitive, or negative, the team may collectively feel completely uninspired. There are a lot of factors that can derail a brainstorm, but here are some of the common reasons a brainstorming session goes wrong.
Number 1, unbalanced conversation. Extroverted personalities and quick thinkers dominate the conversation, leaving no time for other team members to contribute.
That never happens, Claire.
Then there's the anchoring effect. Participants converge on the first few ideas that are brought up in a brainstorm, which then stifles new ideas, and it prevents the team from moving on. Awkward silence.
Awkward silence.
Participants are unprepared, leaving you with a meeting full of painful silence, or worse yet, a meeting that's cut short to put everyone out of their misery. Sticking to the simple guidelines that we showed you can help you to avoid these common issues, and instead bring your team together to gather a list of great ideas for potential causes for the problem.
In your workbook is a 1-point lesson for basic brainstorming. Advanced brainstorming techniques will be introduced in the improve phase, which is coming up later.
We can use our SIPOC for structured brainstorming. Structured brainstorming just means that we're using a frame or a tool to organize the list of ideas. In this case, it means that we use each of the input and process steps as a guide. What specific characteristics of the input might be causing the late deliveries? In this example, the team identifies that deliveries of the incoming paper supply is sometimes late. There's one idea. Now the team moves on to the process step and identifies that there's a bottleneck and long delays between steps 2 and step 3 of the process. And as they move along the process, they suggest that the final step of the process might be understaffed.
This is what it might look like in real life. We have the SIPOC up, and in a structured way using our process, the participants offer ideas of what might be causing the problem. In the SIPOC on the left, the team has identified accuracy and efficiency as their project whys. And through this brainstorming session, they've identified one step in the process that has 3 potential causes of inefficiency and inaccuracy. The example in the middle shows that the project why is consistency, and the potential causes, or X's, are problems with data and logic in all of the steps. The third example shows a project why of efficiency, and the brainstorming is pointing to the input and the first step in the process of potential areas to focus the analysis on.
In all the examples, the teams are sharing their ideas, collaborating, and narrowing the focus in order to prepare to collect data to be analyzed. Another very common tool for structured brainstorming is the fishbone diagram. This is a great tool to discover your X's. Some people don't call it the fishbone diagram, they go with the more descriptive cause and effect diagram. And others don't like either of those names, so they call it the Ishikawa diagram, named after its creator. In any case, it's all the same tool and it's used for structured brainstorming.
So as you remember from our yellow belt where we introduced this tool, the problem or solution that we are trying to understand is in the head of the fish. The horizontal line is the spine of the fish, and off of that spine are the major categories of potential causes. The purpose of this tool is to brainstorm potential causes, and this structure is organizing our ideas into categories and subcategories. Another way of using this tool is to have the team brainstorm all of the ideas for causes of the problem first, and then when all the ideas have been gathered, the team can group similar ideas together and see what categories emerge. It's a very flexible tool, and like most tools, we have to make the tool work for us, not the other way around.
The point of this tool is to help us understand not only what the problem is, but also why it happens. It's only when we can determine why an event or failure occurred that we can create a workable corrective measure or solution that prevents future occurrences. Here we're showing you a simple example of drilling down to levels of detail using the fishbone diagram. The problem is that it's hard to find supplies when they're needed. And the first idea was that they're not here when we need them because everyone stocks supplies at their own workstation. Instead of a different idea in a new category, the team continued to drill down this category and said, well, people are stocking supplies at their own desk because they're not available in the stockroom when needed. And then drilling a little deeper, that's because inventory is not updated in the system regularly. So a fishbone can be used to gather all kinds of ideas in different categories, as well as to drill down into deeper levels of a particular idea.
You'll notice the lines or the bones of the fish are used to capture the ideas. The format of the lines is not as important as a drill down and exploring of all the different categories. So in your workbooks, you'll see our fishbone diagram template. Because it's in Excel, just like your other templates, it doesn't look exactly like a fish. But the key elements are all there. The team can create the fishbone diagram on a whiteboard or on a flip chart using stickies, or they can project this template where everyone can see and create it right there in the template. The important thing is to utilize a structure to ensure that the team is focusing on all the different potential categories and not just anchoring to a couple assumptions. At the bottom of your workbook page, you'll see some common categories that are used to prompt ideas. There's the affinity method, where the team brainstorms ideas and then lets the categories emerge, or 4S, surroundings, suppliers, skills, and systems. There's the 8P, and probably the most well-known is 6M. As with all the tools, make the tool work for you and try multiple ways to gather the most robust list of ideas.
And your one-point lesson for the fishbone diagram. We'll cover more brainstorming tools and advanced techniques in the improve phase, But this is a great tool to start, even at the early stage of measure, to begin collecting the team's ideas about what might be causing the problem.
We've covered a few methods to generate ideas, brainstorming, the SIPOC, the fishbone diagram, and now it's time to prioritize our ideas and narrow our focus to identify the causes that we think are the most important for our project.
We introduced multi-voting and the filter matrix in our Yellow Belt training, and these are great tools to use as a follow-up to our brainstorming sessions.
As a refresher, multi-voting is a group decision-making tool, and it's used to narrow down options. Multi-voting is also known as nominal group technique. It's great to use in conjunction with the fishbone diagram, and the idea is that each person gets to vote on their top choices. In this case, we are asking the group to identify, of our list of potential causes, which are the most likely high-impact contributors to the problem that we are trying to solve. We could either have a long drawn-out debate that leaves everyone exhausted, or we could eliminate the verbal cyclone and do a quick multi-vote.
The method is simple. Count the total number of options and divide by 4. That's how many votes each person gets. You can decide whether participants can put all their votes on one item if they feel really passionate about it, or you can require that they place each vote on a different option. Each participant makes their selections privately, for example, making their selections silently at the table. And then when everyone's made their private selections, they go up to the whiteboard or wherever the fishbone diagram is posted, and they mark their selections. You can use sticky dots, a check mark with a marker, or whatever. The point is that you'll end up with a visual display of the group's input. Now, just count the item or the items with the highest votes, and you have your narrowed down list of potential causes based on the experience of the team.
Pretty simple. Another good tool for prioritizing the potential causes is the filter matrix. This tool was also introduced in Yellow Belt, and here's your 1-point lesson on it. The team will need to identify the 2 main criteria. So for example, impact on the problem and resources or cost to gather the data might be the criteria for selecting which potential causes to focus on.
Once the potential root causes have been identified and prioritized, the team will have their initial list ready. To capture these potential causes and to determine the next steps, we've created an informal hypothesis table. This form is used to organize the initial hypotheses. Let's talk through the form and you'll see how helpful this tool is.
So the first column is the informal hypothesis. This field is to capture the team's proposed explanations of causes of the problem. Project why. Each hypothesis is stated one at a time. Each gets its own row. A classic mistake at this point is that people tend to mix up solutions and causes. We want to make sure that we state each suspected cause and not a solution. For example, again, instead of we need new equipment or people need more training, we say equipment is unreliable or staff is incorrectly filling out the forms. The next column identifies where this hypothesis lives on your SIPOC. Is it in the input or in the process? This can be important, especially if your hypothesis is in the input. The real root cause may be in the upstream process, which may be out of scope for the team to analyze and improve.
The next column is evidence. In the measure phase of the project, the evidence might be limited. This is a place for the team to capture facts or data to explain why the team believes that this might be true. It lets us know what we have to start with. The next 2 columns come from our filter matrix and identifies the estimated impact of the causes on the problem and also the availability of data. For the estimated impact, the team rates the impact that they believe this hypothesis has on the overall problem is either low, medium, or high. Then the next consideration is the availability of data. Could this hypothesis be supported with data? Rate the availability of data to support this hypothesis on a scale of low, moderate, or high.
Next, we have the potential to observe. Could this hypothesis be supported by watching the process in action? Rate the potential of observing evidence in the process on a scale of 1 equals low, not observable or difficult to observe, 3 it's moderate, And 5, it's highly observable. Some suspected root causes can be verified with data. Some can only be verified by actually going to the process and observing what's happening. And some causes can be verified by both data and process observation. This is a great way for the team to begin to prepare for the analysis phase.
And here's the one-point lesson for using the informal hypothesis table. This helps to prioritize your hypotheses that can be confirmed or validated with data. The next step is to select the right measure and display for each. The final step with the informal hypothesis table is to determine whether the team will go forward with the analysis of the root cause hypothesis. The team will have to make a decision of go or no go based upon the suspected level of impact and the potential to confirm with data or process observation. If we have a potentially high impact cause that can be confirmed with data and process observation, that's definitely going to be a go. And conversely, if we have a potentially low impact cause that's not feasible to confirm with data or process observation, we'll probably take a pass.
This doesn't mean that data has to be readily available or that observing the process has to be easy. It might be that the team will have to be creative or do some extra work to get to that data, but it would be worth it for a high impact cause. So this is a really important tool for the team to strategize their next steps to get to the greatest results for this project.
In our example here, the team has decided that there are 2 different measures that will help the team to validate the hypothesis. 1, they will measure the time it takes for the operator to complete the final step. And 2, they'll measure the wait time between steps 4 and 5. So we have 2 time-based measures. Hey, call your friends now so they can watch you study your notes and prepare for a quiz on Chapter 5, your analyzed measures.
We've already identified our baseline measures and have determined what chart we want to use to display it. And for the potential causes, we conduct brainstorming, the fishbone diagram, and our SIPOC to identify potential important X's. We've captured all of the current root cause theories on our initial hypothesis table and are ready to execute a data collection plan to determine the current baseline, the whys, and facilitate the analysis of causes in the analyze phase.
Developing a data collection plan assures that the data that we collect is really the data that we need. It prevents us from simply using whatever data are already available and makes sure that the data we collect is accurate and good data, because we're going to be making a lot of decisions based upon this data.
If we show this phone to 100 people and ask the question, how many defects are on this phone? How many different answers do you think we'll get? I don't know, but our answers would be all over the place, and we certainly wouldn't learn much about our defects if we collected data that way. In this section, we are going to learn how important it is to define our measures so clearly that everyone counts things exactly the same way.
It's also important to make sure that everyone uses the same method or procedure to collect the data. How we take the measure is just as important as the definition of the measure. Let's talk about cookies. Here's a true story. 8 people made cookies using the same recipe, and here are the pictures of their cookies. What happened? Well, one batch is overbaked. It has a dry, burnt flavor. Another forgot the eggs. Those are the dry on the outside and doughy on the inside. One batch was beaten too much and turned out tough and hard. The next batch had too little flour and the cookies burned easily. You get the point. It's the same with gathering data. We have to have a crystal clear description of the measure, and we also have to specify how to take that measure. We have to, and this is important, we have to be careful not to introduce more variation or more defects into the data just by how we collect the data.
So in your workbooks is a picture of some peanut M&Ms. We're going to count defects 3 different times with the same set of data. And no, you're not allowed to eat them while we're busy with this. So try number 1. Take a close look at the M&Ms and in the table below, track how many defects you find. Use your data to calculate the defects per unit, the DPMO, percentage defective, and sigma level. Pause the video now. Okay, how confident are you in your results? If there were 10 people doing this exercise with you, do you think you'd all have the same answers? Probably not. Let's give you a little more information. There are 3 types of defects: a splotch, a crack, and too small. Now let's try this again. Label the first 3 columns as splotch, crack, and small, and then measure the defects for your second try. Pause the video again, and let's see how you do this time.
You're so weird.
Okay. Now that may or may not have been any better, I'm not sure. But let's try this again with some better descriptions. A splotch looks like this. A grey spot on the colourful candy shell looks like this. And a crack looks like this and cuts through the candy shell. And any individual candy that is less than 3/4 of an inch or just under 2 centimeters is considered too small. Now try for the 3rd time to count the defects and fill out the table with your data. Pause the video now.
And welcome back. Chances are good that you didn't have enough information to complete the information for try number 1. And if you had completed more for try number 2, you were doing a lot of guessing. But for try number 3, you are all using specific definitions and methods to measure defects. And chances are good that your numbers came very close to reality. So the point of this exercise is to give you an experience with the importance of how we collect data. If our data collection numbers are all off, then we'll be making decisions using bad information. How much difference was there from your first try to your 3rd? And this was just a little group of cartoon M&Ms.
Some difference. So there are some pretty sophisticated ways to assess a measurement system, but we want to keep it simple. And the key terms or concepts to consider when collecting data are repeatability, reproducibility, accuracy, and precision. These terms might all sound like the same thing, so let's clarify these definitions.
Repeatability. If the same person follows the same process and gets the same results, that measurement is repeatable.
Reproducibility. If one person gets a result and another person follows the exact same procedures and processes and gets the same result, that measurement is reproducible.
Accuracy indicates how close the measure is to reality or the true value. And precision refers to the degree of consistency or variation in your measurement.
So with this next session, the data collection plan, we will cover the details that we need to consider to make sure that our process to collect data is repeatable, reproducible, accurate, and precise.
Oh, by the way, the answers to the M&M activity are on the top of this page in your workbook, in case you're wondering how you did. We're here now to introduce the data collection plan template. This form will need to be completed for each measure that the team will gather. So if we have 2 baseline measures and 5 hypothesis measures that we need to analyze, we'll fill out this form 7 times. Get it? 1 per measure.
We'll walk through the elements of this form now, and for your future reference, each field on the form has a note to explain what goes on in the cell. And the example that you see here is also in a template file. So you don't have to memorize these, just follow along as we talk through the form.
We start with the measure basics at the top of the form. The name of the measure, which is just the non-technical or the simple name for the metric, so you can keep the forms organized. Again, consistent with other forms, the yellow cells indicate free-form text, and the light green cells indicate that there's a drop-down list for you. There are many options for things to measure, but the skill is to ensure that we're gathering information that best answers the questions that we have. It all starts with a question, and this is where we identify the best way to answer it. If we're an improvement team in a vineyard, We might be measuring number of flowers per vine, dates of frosts, number of bunches per vine, etc. Selecting the best measure is a combination of two things, meaningful and manageable. The measure that we select has to be able to answer the question. That's what makes it meaningful. It also has to be feasible to collect or manageable. While there might be many options, understanding that you are looking for a meaningful and manageable measure will usually lead you to your best options.
The next cell is just a simple question of whether this is a Y or an output measure, or an X, a causal measure. Next is the unit of measure. If we are studying a vineyard, depending on our question, our unit might be the entire vine, the trunk, a leaf, or a cluster of grapes. If our question is what proportion of filled wine bottles are underweight, our measure might be proportion. And when we are defining the unit, we have to decide, are we counting individual bottles, cases, pallets, or another example, if we are the quality inspector for a potato chip factory and our measure is number of defects, there are many different units that we can study. A potato, an individual potato chip, a bag of chips, it's endless. And the driving factor for what makes this decision is understanding the question. That's what the next field is all about.
The purpose of the measure reminds you to capture the question that this measure is answering. Is it to validate a problem, to understand current performance, to predict future performance, to identify or validate causal relationships?
The next part of the form is about data display. You might choose to display your data with multiple charts. This section identifies what charts you plan on using and also asks you to capture what will be on the Y and X axis of your charts. This is a good prep to make sure that you're all set up to create the chart once the data has been collected.
The next field is a big one. This is the operational definition for the measure. Now, depending on your specific scenario, you may need more space for this, and if you do, just adjust the form. This is where you provide the specific definition of the measure as well as the procedure for how the measure will be taken. The rule for the operational definition is to write it, then test it with people who don't know what you're talking about. The operational definition needs to stand on its own, meaning that you won't necessarily be there to explain the gray areas. Once you've tested it with some people, get their feedback and adjust the definition to make it foolproof.
So the next section is the data source and data collection method. The source of the data just asks you to define where it is coming from. Maybe it's automated data that is kept in a particular database. Maybe it's in a spreadsheet on someone's hard drive. Or maybe the data doesn't yet exist and we have to manually track it by observing the process. Wherever we are getting our data from, we need to specify the sources here.
The next piece is the data collection method. How will the data be collected? Will someone from the IT department generate a report? Will the receptionist keep a tally sheet? Will the operators track it on a whiteboard every time they see a defect? There are so many ways to actually collect the data, and it might be different for each measure. So this is where we make that clear for our measure. The frequency describes how often that data will be collected. We'll cover this more deeply in the upcoming section on sampling. But just for a few moments, we're going to dive into a little bit of a more detail here, a little bit of a rabbit hole about manual data collection.
Manual data collection means that we are not using the system or automated reports to gather our data. And the majority of manual data collection is done with forms or check sheets or tally sheets. Check sheets are used to collect data in real time and are usually divided into different categories that each have different significance. User can decide what event or problem will be used as basis for this check sheet, create operational definitions, and determine when data will be collected and for how long.
The check sheet is another simple and effective tool that's useful in many Lean Six Sigma projects. It's a handy tool for both qualitative and quantitative data gathering and analysis. Check sheets help to systematically collect and organize data and can be done on a paper form, a whiteboard, or any other method to capture the relevant info. This example illustrates how people feel about bad data collection, and we probably didn't even make this up.
Using a check sheet is appropriate when the data can be observed and collected repeatedly by either the same person or the same location. It is also an effective tool when collecting data on frequency, such as frequency histogram chart, and identifying patterns of events, problems, defects, and defect locations, and for the identification of defect causes. There are different types of check sheets. Commonly used are tabular check sheets or tally sheets, location check sheets, and graphical or distribution check sheets.
Here we have an example to study complaints of too many interruptions in the operating room. The team developed a checklist to quantify the interruptions and distractions in the operating room. People sometimes confuse a check sheet with a checklist. The list we use for groceries, and the report you get from the auto repair shop with things checked off after service, oil, filter, tire, pressure, tread, etc. Those are checklists. A location or concentration diagram is another great type of check sheet. When you rent a car, you probably receive a document with the sketch of a car, which allows you to circle any damages, dents, or scratches on the car with the corresponding mark on the diagram. This is an example of the location diagram. A variation of this could be to mark directly on the form where mistakes occur. For example, if information is missing on an application, you could mark it directly on the form. Or if we're tracking scratches on a phone, we can show the defects on a diagram to indicate the location.
The check sheet is a simple and effective way to display data. It's a good first step in understanding the nature of the problem, as it provides a uniform data collection tool. It is very useful to help distinguish opinions from facts.
So that was just a bit about check sheets and manual data collection, but you might have the scenario where you just have to fill out a request for a report to be generated. The point is to clarify on our form which method will be used for this particular measure. Now, out of the rabbit hole and back to our form.
This next section is about the integrity of our data. What are the known or likely issues with our data? It's a pretty common problem that people don't generally trust their data. Most studies show that people in organizations, even the data specialists, have something like 30% or so confidence in their data. Again, if we are going to be basing important decisions on our data, and we are, then we have to confront any integrity issues that we might have with our data. This section of the form allows a space for you to identify any problems that might exist with your data, as well as how you will mitigate those issues.
For example, we might identify 4 potential issues with our data. Data is manipulated, there are multiple versions of the file, there are duplicate rows in the spreadsheet, and there are some bad calculations in there due to human error. And the team has identified ways to minimize the issues. So the permissions on the file have been restricted, we're sure to use the most updated version, and the duplicate rows have been removed. And we've automated the problematic calculations. This is another key point for our stakeholders. When we present our data, they will be very happy to point out all the things that might be wrong with your data collection method. And addressing these potential issues ahead of time will give you a lot of credibility and will give them a lot more confidence in your work.
Stratification is the classification of data into different groups. What factors or strata for this measure will be collected to identify or separate the data into subgroups? For example, account type, age group, product category, guest type, region, etc. It's important to think this through so that you only have to collect the data once. It's very common for teams who rush through the data collection planning to have to do it all over again because they missed collecting all the info that was needed in the first place.
What time period will your data cover? This decision comes from multiple factors, such as how much data do you need? How will it be segmented? In other words, weekly, monthly, quarterly, and how much data do you need for your chart? This will also be affected a bit by your sampling plan, which we'll cover soon. And lastly, will you be collecting data from the entire population, or will you be collecting a sample of data and drawing conclusions about the population using that sample? The next chapter is all about sampling, so you'll understand how to answer this yes or no question once we've gone through that chapter.
Before we go to the next chapter, just a quick step back to take a little tour of the important milestones that got us to our data collection plan. We used our SIPOC to solidify our project Y measure and then brainstormed potential causes in the input and process. We used the fishbone diagram to explore the different possible contributors to the problem, and then we completed a data collection plan for each Y and each X measure. Now it's time to give the video a nice little pause again. We're going to talk about you while you review your notes and prepare for a fun little quiz on chapter number 6, data collection. It has been our sincere pleasure being with you through this part of the training, and we thank you for your dedication to creating a better workplace and an environment that you can truly enjoy.